Good afternoon, this is Sean Golding with Golding & Golding, here to discuss the basics of the difference between the updated delinquency procedures and the streamlined offshore filing procedures, domestic and foreign. By way of background, this all relates to international reporting, and different taxpayers may have reporting requirements in accordance with the FBAR and FATCA, foreign corporations, assets, crypto, things of that nature. So who is considered a U.S. person? It's typically going to be a U.S. citizen, a legal permanent resident, a foreign national who meets the substantial presence test. Non-resident aliens who may make certain elections to be treated as a U.S. person for their tax return may be considered a U.S. person for some reporting, at least to the portion of the dual tax return that they're considered a U.S. person versus non-resident alien. And other forms they may not have to file, like the FBAR. So it's important to take a look before just jumping in and filing a form that you may not have to file. I make a quick reference here about cryptocurrency. Recently, FinCEN, Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, the organization responsible, the department responsible for the FBAR, released some proposed regulations involving transactions with cryptocurrency similar to SAR and CTR, currency transaction and suspicious activity reports. In addition, there is a Notice 2020-2, I believe, that recently came out, which essentially said our goal as FinCEN is to recommend you wonderful taxpayers to have to file the FBAR as well for overseas cryptocurrency. So something to keep in mind. Offshore reporting is getting harder, and the IRS is coming down harder than they ever have before. Now, the two main programs we're going to discuss today are the Delinquency Procedures and Streamlined. Streamlined Filing Compliance Procedures are broken down further into the Streamlined Domestic Offshore Procedures, Streamlined Foreign Offshore Procedures. With these programs, there's a certification form you have to file depending on which program you do, the 14654 for domestic, the 14653 for foreign. So you're certifying under penalty of perjury. It's a big deal. Penalties are either going to be a 5% penalty for the domestic or a penalty waiver for Streamlined Foreign. That's why Streamlined Foreign is such a great program. You didn't even have to file original tax returns for Streamlined Foreign. And we have other videos specific to each program. But generally, the main difference between Streamlined and Delinquency from the Streamlined perspective is Delinquency is an alternative to the Streamlined programs. Therefore, when you're dealing with Streamlined, there's more bureaucracy you have to deal with. You got to do the certification forms. If you're doing a domestic, you have to fill out the penalty computation. You got to sign it under penalty of perjury. For the Delinquency Procedures, it's an alternative. It's not technically a program. It was primarily used as an alternative to Streamlined for taxpayers who have to go back and do this reporting, but primarily forms. There were no substantive changes to the tax return that required a change in the tax liability. So maybe filing the 8938, but there's no unreported income. And in that scenario, taxpayers could usually avoid any penalty whatsoever. Recently, in early mid-November, the IRS updated the delinquency procedures. The updated procedures essentially reverts it back to a reasonable cause submission, and so there's no guarantee of a penalty waiver. There wasn't a guarantee under delinquency either, but it was pretty solid. As long as you didn't have the unreported income, you were set. The way that they've updated it, it's pretty similar to a reasonable cause submission. What you will find when you're going through your research is that most code sections, when you get to the bottom of the statute, it'll say something like, taxpayer, the penalties aren't going to be issued if the taxpayer's lack of reporting was due to reasonable cause and not willful neglect. So preparing a reasonable cause submission to avoid the penalties is an alternative to the Streamlined program. It's not really an alternative to the Streamlined Foreign program because there's no penalties under Streamlined Foreign. So most people wouldn't opt for delinquency in that scenario. But with Streamlined Domestic 5% penalty, clients can have $5-10 million sometimes of unreported assets, accounts, and investments. That's a pretty stiff penalty. So delinquency / reasonable cause could be an alternative to that. One common scenario is how far back do you have to go back in order to report? And so when you're doing the Streamlined program, it's 3 years of amended returns and 6 years of FBARs. Typically, the informational returns are going to be limited to 3 years unless you've got some additional 3520s or some other issues as well. Delinquency, it's normally going to be 3 to 6 years, just depending on the taxpayer scenario. Did they just come to the U.S. 6 years ago and they want to completely get into compliance now? Or, do they only want to do 3 years because they have some incredible tax liability for 5 years ago and they really don't want to have to go back and report that if the IRS isn't the wiser? So if you're considering getting into compliance, you've got the Streamline, you've got delinquency. If you're willful, unfortunately, none of these programs apply to you. You have to do a voluntary disclosure program. Don't get suckered by some of these attorneys that would tell you, hey, it's just minor tax non-compliance. There's no de minimis exception to willfulness. If you're willful, you're willful. It doesn't matter if it's $50 worth of income or if it's $100,000 worth of income. If you are willful, you never want to do the non-willful program, because then you're going to certify under penalty of perjury that you're non-willful when you were willful. And that can lead to a big headache down the line. We've had taxpayers come to us after they've gone to some of these other shysters who try to do this to them, and it's not good. So it's essentially a quiet disclosure. So if you're willful, you do voluntary disclosure. If you're non-willful, you do the Streamlined programs or delinquency. We have lots of free information available on our main website, goldinglawyers.com. If you feel it's appropriate, you can reach out and schedule a reduced fee initial consultation. Again, my name is Sean Golding with Golding & Golding. Thank you for your time. Enjoy the rest of your day.